Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
As you'll know, Fighting on Film and Warfare Media partnered up to give our listeners a huge discount on high-quality Cold War posters. But now there's more. Warfare Media also offers clothing and the chance to order OP4 DPM camouflage uniforms. Support the podcast and use the code FOF20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Don't delay, visit warfaremedia.net today.
Later this week, the 19th of April marks the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution, with Battles of Lexington Concord. In classic FOF style, we thought we'd cover a pretty obscure 1988 Hallmark TV movie, April Morning. Why April Morning and not something like The Patriot or Revolution or any of the other probably better American Revolution movies? Well, because April Morning has some interesting depiction of the pivotal first battle of the war. And we're thrilled this week to be joined by a very special guest, Joel Bohy. Joel's a appraiser of historic arms and militaria who regularly appears on the US Antiques Roadshow. And he's a historian who has recently been doing some really interesting research and co-written a brilliant new book which examines the Battles of Lexington and Concord using some modern forensic techniques and some really interesting kind of in-the-field research. And the book sheds new light on how the battle was fought. So who better to join us than Joel for April Morning? Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, welcome. It's gonna be great fun, this one, because I don't know much about this period really. Matt always says to me, he says anything pre-1900, Robbie, it's like it didn't exist to you, and I go, you're right. So I'm gonna learn a lot this week.
I feel the same way about post 1780. So
fair play.
Well, we all have our favorite kind of periods.
Blind spot.
I love this period because I wrote my undergraduate dissertation about light infantry tactics. So it was Braddock's March and a little bit of Lexington Concord and Bushy Run and King's Mountain and all those kind of really interesting 17th century kind of light infantry.
Matt always just peppers in this every week, Joel. He's done a thesis on this. He's done an undergrad on that. I'd never pin him down.
I'm going to start off by running through cast. It's a pretty tight cast, but an interesting one. I think this week we got Tommy Lee Jones, Oscar winner, as Moses Cooper, who's leading out the cast. Rolling Thunder in 1977, The Package in 1989, Firebirds 1980, Under Siege 2 1992 with Steven Seagal, The Fugitive 93, his greatest moment.
His greatest moment.
US Marshals 98, Small Soldiers the same year, Rules of Engagement 2000, Space Cowboys, No Country for Old Men, Lincoln, The Emperor. A really amazing career, and this is probably one of the more subdued Tommy Lee Jones performances, I would say.
To a point. He's incredibly grumpy, but to a point.
Then we got Susan Blakely, who plays Sarah Cooper. She's an Emmy-nominated actress with a very long TV career, appearing in a couple of military-orientated productions over the years, including as Ava Braun in 1981's The Bunker opposite Anthony Hopkins.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was a really interesting kind of credit. She was also in 1990's The Incident, which is a Walter Matthau TV movie where he defends a German POW who's accidentally murdered someone in a small US town. And then Pensacola, The Wings of Gold, which is like a late 90s TV show about a US Marine Corps Navy aviators unit. And then we kind of got our second lead in the form of Chad Lowe, who plays Adam Cooper. And Chad is Rob Lowe's brother. That's probably one of his more famous claims to fame, I suppose. Long list of TV credits.
Already.
I know.
It took about 5 minutes.
Long list of TV credits as an actor and a director. He also appeared in 1997's The Presence of Mine Enemies, which is a TV film about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising with Charles Dance, of all people. Robert Ulrich plays Joseph Simmons. Again, a very long TV and film career in the 70s. He appeared in Magnum Force with Clint Eastwood in 1973, Killdozer in 1974, SWAT in 1975. And then he was in a really interesting kind of alt history Third World War mini-series called America 87 with Chris Christopherson and quite a decent cast, actually, where America has been occupied by the Soviet Union. Kind of like Red Dawn, but 10 years on. Really, I kind of want to watch it. And then President's Man, A Line in the Sand, 2002. And then just to round out the cast this week is Rip Torn, who is, as always, larger than life on screen, portraying Solomon Chandler.
Film. Surely, it's the best thing about the cast.
Kind of is. His accent's all over the show, though. It's great.
No idea where he's from.
So Rip was a Korean War veteran, U.S. Army, I believe, Oscar-nominated, incredible career. His military-orientated productions include Time Limit, 1957, Porkchop Hill, 59, Heroes Island, 1962, which is a film which is on Prime, and it's set in 1712 and is about indentured servants. And apparently it turns into kind of like a Robinson... Swiss Family Robinson-esque kind of movie where they defend an island against pirates. It's I know it sounds
this sounds like podcast material.
It really does. And then just for Rob, he was in an episode of Combat in 1964. He was also in an episode of 12 O'Clock High in 65, Beach Red in 67, By Dawn's Early Light in 1990, Canadian Bacon, of course, in 1995, Down Periscope in 1996, and then, of course, he reunited with Tommy Lee Jones in the Men in Black franchise in the late 90s, early 2000s.
And you didn't mention the Larry Sanders Show just to annoy me.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't military orientated. So
he's a Korean War vet in that. He mentions it nearly every week.
He does. Yeah, war movie adjacent, that one.
Yes, exactly.
So that's cast. There's more. Obviously, a larger cast at play, but they don't really have a lot to do. They're the key characters. Tommy Lee Jones's character kind of bows out midway through, and his kind of role in the film is taken over by Robert Ulrich's character, and he becomes the foil to Adam in a way. How about production, Rob?
Right, so it's based upon a 1961 novel by Howard Fast, and I think it's used in schools in the US when teaching about the US Revolution. Is that right, Joel?
Well, yeah, I mean, I read it because of where I grew up and being interested in April 19th every year. But yeah, I think the first time I read it was in elementary school. I
saw a couple of mentions that it was used in various. Chap had written a review, and he said he used it in one of his honors classes, and he wanted to write a review of it, which he compares the two in the review, and he said the book's by far the better of the two.
All the comments on the YouTube version that I watched were saying that everyone had read it in school, so it must be on the curriculum somewhere. But it was picked up by Hallmark as part of their Hallmark Hall of Fame anthology series, which at the time was being aired on CBS in the US. The book was adapted to screen by James Lee Barrett, who is known for his screen work. He wrote The Green Berets, Smokey and the Bandit, and The Quick and the Dead, to name but a few. It's directed by Oscar winner Delbert Mann, whose works include Separate Tables, 1958, the film that won David Niven his Oscar. Cold War, he won it. I think he won Delbert Mann won his own Oscar for 1953's Marty. So it's quite.
Oh, that's Borgnine, isn't it, Marty? I
think it is, yes.
Yeah.
He also did a Cold War United States Air Force drama, Gathering of Eagles, in 1963, the 1979 TV adaptation of All Quiet on a Western Front, and The Last Days of Patton in 1986. So it's quite not unfamiliar to the war genre, man.
I like the 1979 version of All Quiet. I think it's pretty good.
I think it's probably one of the strongest ones, isn't it, really? I think this is one that people think of when they think of it.
I think it was hard for Americans who knew John Boy Walton to catch on to it. But
and then we have BAFTA nominee Frank Tidy, who is this film cinematographer. He's best known for his work on The Duelists, Under Siege, and The Package, to name but a few there.
So he did the cinematography for Duelists. Wow.
Frank Tidy did the cinematography for The Duelists.
That's incredible. Yep. I would never have guessed that. That film's beautiful, and this film is
We
Has
covered
its
it, Matt,
moments.
and you were on production, so I don't know how you
I
don't
know.
remember.
That's true. Yeah.
The score was by Emmy Award-winning sound designer and composer Alan Ferguson. She worked on Dune, Charlie's Angels, The Last Days of Patton, and the 1978 adaptation of The Four Feathers. This was filmed on location in Quebec, Canada, as far as I'm aware, and it aired in the United States on CBS on the 24th of April, 1988. And there's no box office take or budget this week. A lot of these Hallmark films just don't have anything to do with budget on them at all. You can work out from the stars, we're probably looking at maybe like what, $1 million ish, maybe a bit more.
Couple more. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
think so. Maybe about 3 million mark, possibly.
Big Rip
However,
Torn money.
Yeah, I think Rip Torn money. Yeah, exactly. Think how much he's going to drink on set, and you could just give or take that a little bit. Anyway, but the film was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Music Composition for Ferguson, but she lost out to Lawrence Rosenhall for his work on 1988's TV special The Bourne Identity. So,
Oh wow, that's Richard Chamberlain who died recently, wasn't it?
I think
that
it
one.
might be. Yeah, it's
yeah.
the 80s one.
And that was off the dome. I could be completely way off.
Might be right. I don't know myself. And then we come on to this week's retro review, which is from the LA Times on April 23rd, 1988 by Howard Rose. And I've truncated it a little bit for ease. And he says, the performances are credible and credit director Delbert Mann with avoiding schmaltz and bringing a tense realism to the fateful clash on the green, as vastly outnumbered militiamen stand nervously before the thundering drums and approaching line of British muskets and bayonets before finally breaking. It's a fine sequence leading to hit and run counterattacks in which Adam at once kills and is repulsed by killing. The bloody skirmishes and Adam's personal awakening are nicely executed, but there isn't much point, except to state the obvious, that we are sometimes forced by circumstances into doing what is unpleasant, and that warfare ages everyone.
Relatively fair review, I think.
It's not too bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we've covered the LA Times before, they can be really brutal, but they were quite kind to this one. And that brings us on to this week's one-word reviews. So we have JMCN, who says never heard of it. We have The Night Irish, who says acoustics. He says the best part of the film is when the redcoats emerge from the woods and the sound of the fifes and drum open up. Brian Williams goes redcoats. Paul says toll the bell. Matthew Moss says rebels. And we had Lance Nilsson, who said that he'd never heard of it either. So we had a few who just said they'd never heard of it. And I can only assume that's because over here, we don't really learn about the revolution.
No.
Really?
No.
School? I think we mentioned it once. And I was like, oh, what happened there? And then I went away and watched some of my own stuff. But if you hadn't been paying attention in school, you'd never know it had happened. It's really weird, this, I think. Like
the curriculum in the UK when I was in school was kind of scattergun. I remember we did the Plains Indian Wars, but we didn't do, kind of some like really obvious stuff that we probably should have done.
Yeah.
Like colonialism, British colonialism.
We watched 20 minutes of Tombstone for Western America for a little bit, and then we moved on to the Empire. It was weird. I think my teacher just liked Val Kilmer. It was a weird
I know.
one.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
I think it's obviously with it being a TV movie as well, and it's never been released on VHS or DVD. From what I can tell, at least, that probably limits the exposure. But it is up online. If you do a little bit of a Google search, you'll find it on YouTube. I think
5 or 6 versions of it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think the rights must have been lapsed or sold out, or they just pirated it. I don't know.
Lionheart bought out, I think, or took the rights. So that's the free one you can see. Yeah.
So as always, that brings us on to this week's Alley Tally.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
So Joel, there's a lot to talk about with the film, obviously, in terms of weapons and equipment. From my understanding, a lot of the redcoats, the British, were portrayed by reenactors. Is that right?
So when you look at the film, you can tell the difference between the fairly decent reenactors and then the extras that are kitted out, especially around Lexington Green. When they march onto the green, most of those folks are a lot of them are reenactors. And then when they skip to the little scenes where they're trying to clean out the outbuildings and stuff, those are all movie extras. And you can, if you really look at it, you can see the difference between the two.
Yeah, like the belts were like really, that young lad that steps into the barn, they're like really hanging off him, aren't they? And it's really ill-fitting. It's quite funny.
Yeah. People stop using the high port and they're starting holding it more like a modern rifle.
Yeah, he's got his hand like down by the butt and not even up by the line. It's that's one of the stupid scenes. But again, that's because they didn't have somebody who knew what they were doing. They had just kitted out an actor to be that young British soldier.
So there's a scene in the film during a committee meeting, like where the town's militia's meeting, and they're discussing. They have a bit of a roll of the arms that are available to them, and they have 116 pieces, some stolen British muskets, some rifles, which I think we'll talk about in a second. I think it breaks down to like 37 rifled guns, 60 smoothbore, 5 dragoon pistols, and 14 British ordnance or Brown Bess are mentioned. So, as someone who's spent a lot of time researching the battle and the weapons used in the battle, what do you think about the film?
Well, if you're talking about that scene, that was one of those scenes that, as I watched it again the other night, that I just shook my head and cringed. So there's no list that survives for what Lexington carried.
That was one thing
militia carried.
Yeah.
The first thing is rifles were not popular in New England. There are very, very few rifles here. The most popular gun to be carrying here would be a smoothbore fowling piece. So having done the archaeology at the Parker's Revenge archaeology project, where after the fight on the green, Captain Parker took care of his dead and wounded, and then he marched off towards Concord to fight the British. We found that spot in 2013 and up through 2015, and we excavated the fired ammunition, and the majority of the rounds that we found that are consistent with being fired by Lexington were from fowling pieces. They also may have had some older 1728 French muskets, surplus, captured stuff from the French and Indian War. There would have been very few King's arms here. The last shipment of King's arms that had come over were in 1755. They were pattern 42 muskets. And those would have been in province stores. Some of them were taken and vanished, and they might have been used. There would have been a scattering of a few. But for the most part, the largest type of gun would be the civilian fowling piece and Massachusetts parts guns. We call them parts guns or Frankenstein guns, where they were assembling guns out of all different types of surplus parts they had. Right. Or whatever they could scrounge or buy from Boston prior to the arms embargo. So that whole scene with the rifles, that just, that's one of the things that we've been trying to dispel on all the writing and shows that I've worked on, is this myth. And it seems to, I filmed a show for Nova that was on the other night, and the producers came over and they're like, we need to talk about how important the rifle was at Bunker Hill. And it's like, no, we don't, because it wasn't. There's a myth, I think, in Europe too, that, the rifle is what won the war, and it certainly was not. So that scene is all made up.
I love it. One of the things I thought was really interesting about the actual scene where Adam and Tommy Lee Jones's character Moses are preparing to go off and muster on the green with the rest of the militia is Tommy Lee Jones is talking to Adam and telling him to feel the weight of shot in his hand. But obviously, with fowling pieces, they're guns that are used to shoot fowl. So they weren't predominantly always using a single lead ball. They were using like a handful of shot. What kind of things have you found from your research, like in the area? Because you've looked at existing historical buildings, you've looked at artifacts and all kinds of different things and accounts. When you were working on your book with Doug Scott. What kind of things did you find? Did you find that they were firing like buck and ball or just ball, or was it just a handful of shot? What kind of loadings and things did you find?
So we found very little buckshot.
Interesting.
For the most part, they're round balls, that are fitted. Obviously, if you have a gun that has a 62-inch bore, you're firing a 56 or 58 caliber ball because of windage with smoothbore guns. But the majority of the balls, or the majority of what we found archaeologically too, are round balls, not buckshot. We found a little bit. And there are some petitions for losses that I found at the Massachusetts Archives. There's one in particular that mentions that a gentleman who was badly wounded lost solid shot, regular shot and some buckshot. But I think, as I watch that scene, I think of it as, again, almost complete BS. But there's something about that scene, I think, where they're making a point. They're trying to tell, he's trying to tell Adam that, he needs to not think, he needs to just do, or else he's going to get killed.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at that and shake my head, but at the same time, he did it for a reason,
Yeah, it's almost like the film's trying to get across that point, and also get across the point that with the fact that they're loading shot rather than like loading a musket, they're the militia. They aren't like trained soldiers. And the film does a lot of it really does hammer that point home. A lot of the dialogue talks about them not being professional soldiers, and the British Army being at that point the best in the world, etc.
Well, that's another partial misnomer. These guys were preparing for this for a long time, and they were preparing shot. They were not the stores that were in Concord and Worcester and other towns. Those were for when the war broke out to supply an army. But each man had to be armed and equipped as according to law. So he had to come with shot fitted to his gun. He had to have a bayonet. Or if he didn't have a bayonet fitted to his gun, he had to have a cutting sword or a tomahawk. And they were drilling, the minute companies themselves, some of them were drilling 3 times a week and learning how to march. And they were using the exact same manual of arms, the 1764 manual that the British were. So some of that is pushing that myth that, these guys were just called up in the middle of the night, grabbed their rifle from over the fireplace and beat the world's best army. And that's not what happened.
I like the way that the movie shows that contrast between the redcoats and the rebels. Like you have that initial engagement, and then they're doing what I kind of assume that militiamen would be doing in that period of. Is that true? Does the movie show that in a good way?
Well, the British soldiers lost command and control on Lexington Green in the morning. The regulars, right off the bat, lost command and control. They had just battalioned together, the light infantry and grenadier companies. They were used to working with their own regiments, and now they were not. So they lose command and control. They lose command and control during the rest of the day. The provincials are trying to keep some command and control, but they don't either. So what happens is many of the militia and minute companies end up fighting basically like light infantry. And end up, shooting and sniping from behind trees and walls and that type of thing. But the light infantry, who's flanking the column, are doing the exact same thing. So they're the light infantry and the provincials and minute companies are fighting in a similar manner.
It's a really interesting battle in that it's fought kind of on the line of march. It's not a static battle that you would think of for the period. It's kind of almost unique in the fact that it's a fighting withdrawal, obviously. And I think that's one of the
rolling battle. Yeah,
and it's one of the interesting things about the film that it does try and depict that quite well.
Yeah, and Lexington Green, the British soldiers march in, the light infantry deploys on the green. Someone fires a shot. The light infantry fire into Captain Parker's company. They kill 8 men and wound 10. They form up again and march off towards Concord to do their job, which was to destroy the warlike stores which were stored in that town: artillery, provisions, ammunition, that type of thing. When they get to Concord, the scenes change a little bit because when the 3 companies of light infantry that are at the North Bridge in Concord are confronted by militia and Minutemen. you've got about 100 light infantry at the bridge, and then you've got about 450 marching down towards them. So, whereas Lexington Green, you've got about 750 British soldiers and about, roughly 80 men from Lexington. So it's kind of the thing flips a little bit when they get to North Bridge. What really changes it is after the British march out of Concord, men from other towns start to arrive near Merriam's Corner. And some of the men who had fought at North Bridge cut behind the main ridge in Concord and come out at Merriam's Corner. And as the column passes, they unleash into the British column. And then at that point, the battle continues to grow larger and larger and larger as more forces come into the fight from other towns. And it just grows and grows and grows until they get back to Boston.
I think it's actually quite interesting. I mean, not only did Rip Torn fire the shot that was heard around the world, but I think it's really interesting that they kind of show they show that growth of men coming from all around, coming from the various different villages and towns and hamlets that are in the area. But the film kind of almost suggests that there's a plan to this, where or rather that there isn't a plan. It's just goes where the redcoats are and shoot. Is that an accurate representation of the battle? Because it sounds like it from what you were saying there. It's, the film is illustrating that men were just marching to the sound of the guns, basically.
Well, they were, in a way. They were marching towards Concord, but there were and there are a few accounts that there were riders that were out that were guiding units, because a lot of the units are forming up and they're marching towards Concord. And it seems that there are people who are guiding them. Nope, Concord's passed, go here, and they're going down different roads. And, it can't be just a, fluke that these guys actually end up hitting the column all the way back, at basically the right times. So, I mean, there were people that had to have been guiding these forces at road junctions and such, but some of them could hear the fighting, and they were going towards the gunfire. But they were marching there as units for the most part. Some guys went out on horseback. I know that there were some folks from the North Shore of Massachusetts who went on horseback and ended up losing their horses. I found their petitions for losses.
What kind of distances were they traveling then? Because obviously, as Brits, we have no comprehension of the distances that they were coming from. Some of them were
traveling, 15 miles.
Wow, okay, that's quite significant.
And they were moving pretty quickly to get to the fight. But you also have to remember that the alarm had gone out fairly early, but it did take time for riders to get from, say, Lincoln in Massachusetts, Lincoln, Massachusetts, up to the North Shore of Danvers or Beverly or Marblehead or Salem, some of those other towns. But the units that were a little bit closer, the towns that were closer, they ended up getting into the fight, basically right at the right time. And if you think about it, there was the main force that they show in the film that marches out under Lieutenant Colonel Smith to Concord, fights at Lexington, and they start marching back, and they get to Lexington Center, and they meet up with a relief force under Lord Percy of 1,000 men. So at that point now, they're around 1,700 men in the British Army that are there to fight their way back towards Boston. So the British forces expand a lot on the other side of Lexington Center.
So we've touched on it a little bit already, but one of our Patreon supporters and listeners, Brian Williams, asked a question, and he said the popular depiction of the British Army during the War of Independence is rigid redcoats blundering about in the woods, being picked off by crack shots of the Minutemen. Is this an accurate depiction? We've already mentioned that they weren't all rifle armed and they weren't all crack shots, and
no,
perhaps the British weren't blundering around quite as much. But there is that scene where they blunder into an ambush with Robert Ulrich's character and Adam, where they pick off about 3 or 4 redcoats, and I'm sure there must have been occasions during the battle where that kind of chaos did happen.
Oh, there was certainly a lot of chaos, and we discussed some of that in our book. But these guys, a lot of the British soldiers, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the British soldiers are looting some of the houses, and they get left behind as the column moves along, and they end up being killed by doing that. So
Right.
you end up with guys that are dead because they stopped to steal stuff from some of the local houses.
Right.
You also end up with some British soldiers shooting their own men by mistake. As the British are getting back towards the village of Menotomy on the east side of Lexington, they start to shoot at all of the houses that might contain people to shoot back at them. So yeah, so that's part of what the book is about, is talking about the bullet strikes and those that survive, and using the modern ballistics to figure out who the shooters were and where the shooters were, et cetera. But some of the British soldiers are marching along the road in main column, firing at the houses. You have British soldiers surrounding the houses, and you have British soldiers sometimes inside the houses. So there's a lot of shooting going on.
Yeah.
And in a lot of it, or in a few instances, these guys are shooting themselves.
Wow.
At the same time, there's a lot of chaos as they get back towards Boston.
I think there's just one depiction of firing from a house in the film where they kind of regroup next to what looks like maybe a church or a barn, and it's where they meet up with Rip Torn again, and that's the only time
Rip's firing from a doorway. Yeah,
That's probably the only time that you see that happen. What kind of things did you find with British soldiers in houses? Like how does that survive? Is it literally just bullet strikes that are still in the fabric of the buildings?
Yeah, some of the bullet holes. Many of the structures that survived at the time are gone now. Urban sprawl, things changed. The houses got taken down.
It's 250 years, isn't it? So
yeah. But there are a few that survive. There's one structure in the modern day town of Arlington, Mass, which is still riddled with bullets, and that's a whole chapter in our book. But we know that house had British soldiers inside of it shooting, and outside of it shooting, based upon a letter that a collector owns from an officer who was actually inside that house, and talked about men being shot around him as he got into the place. And then he counted 11 dead bodies in an orchard, and that one of the guys that was dead, one of the provincials, had 73 balls in his ball pouch and 2 horns of powder. So this guy took a few minutes to count the bodies, and I'm sure he didn't take the time to count all the bullets in his ball pouch, but he wrote 73. So, but yeah, it's
much like Tommy Lee Jones. He could feel.
Yeah, yeah. That whole scene. But no, there was a lot of shooting going on from the houses. But one of the other myths is that the provincials were firing from right up on the road, and maybe during a front or rear guard action, there were guys that were firing from the road. But for the most part, they're firing from a distance, because if they get too close, you have flankers out on either side of that column. That light infantry, as you know, are moving fairly wide outside the column. And if you get too close, they're going to kill you, which did happen also. That happened many times where provincials got caught by the flanking parties and were taken out. So,
there's
some of those scenes,
effort by the film to try and show that, isn't there, where Adam's kind of almost surrounded, and that's about as close as the film gets anyway.
Yeah. And those, some of those scenes, there are some truths to some of those scenes. But I think as a film, they're trying to, take little things and show you how things might have happened. And in a way, they're obviously it's a film, but, they got some of it right. And like many, they got a lot of it wrong, but it still makes its point. I as much as I would like to completely trash it, like I said to you guys before, I grew up in Concord on the battlefield. And as a kid in elementary school, we had to read April Morning and Johnny Tremaine, the Disney version, which is just absolutely awful. And as was this to a bit. But I think one of the people who wrote in was 100% correct that the book, although he condensed events, the book is really well done. I just wish that when they did the film, they had a consultant who could have done better with the material culture. But I guess you could say that with any any of these early films, they pretty much screw up all of them. I mean, one of the worst, and I probably shouldn't throw it out there, but I'm going to, is The Patriot. Just horrendous. Guys running around. He's got two smoothbores are in a rifle and four pistols, and he's shooting from the hip and taking out all these people. It's just absolute crap. This film, they did a little bit of a better job.
What do you think, just in general, the kit and equipment that the guys in the film have? Because there's some nice nuance. Some of them have got like hunting knives, tomahawks, and then obviously we've already mentioned that a lot of the principal British that we see on screen are reenactors, so they have fairly good kit, I would imagine.
The provincials, again, these guys were training for a long time, and as they had regulations, so many of these guys would have had knapsacks. They were ordered to bring provisions for a few days with them. They would have had a blanket, canteen. So none of that stuff is shown in the film. The clothing itself is absolutely horrendous. Just, it's like pirate crap. It's just awful.
I did wonder.
And, that's just the worst part. On the, we've already talked about the guns. On the British side, the scenes with the reenactors for the time it was filmed in 88 are pretty good. They're decent. They're not great, but they're decent. The film extras are absolutely horrific. Again, it's, I was talking with Jonathan Ferguson about this the other day. What good Rev War films are there where they really know about the material culture? And I think there's none.
Have you seen Revolution with Al Pacino?
Oh yeah. That was yeah, that's another horrific one.
So bad that it nearly brought down the studio that filmed it and brought down Al Pacino's career for 6 years.
It's shit. It's total shit. But, this one is, again, and I know I'm saying good things and bad things, but, the material culture, the clothing, these guys didn't run out in April in their shirt sleeves and a vest unbuttoned and run around and fight. These guys, many of them dressed like they were going to meeting, like they were going to church. So they would have had a frock coat on. Some of them had overcoats on because it's April in New England. They're forming up. Lexington formed up at midnight and again. And, they're at dawn on the green. I can tell you that we had snow the past 2 days, and April 19th is a few days away. So it's cold here in the morning. So those are just your typical depictions of Minutemen based upon, the statues in America done, the Minuteman statue at the North Bridge done in 1874, 1875 for the centennial, in his shirt sleeves, dropping the plow, because every guy was out plowing at 2:00 in the morning when they got the alarm, and, the Lexington Minuteman that's on the green, in his shirt sleeves, standing proudly with his musket. They're all well and good, and they're great for, these remembrances of what happened, but it's not correct. And they kind of went with that in the film. So,
I mean, it is Hallmark. It's you
said it right there.
Some slack a little bit.
The Christmas card version, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They are doing their best. So I think that brings us on to favorite scenes, and I'll just kick off. I think when Adam, the initial engagement has happened, and he meets back up with Rip Torn, and Rip Torn just becomes the master of guerrilla warfare for about 5 minutes, and he tells all those Minutemen exactly what to do, sting them all the way to Boston, and he's telling them to go over there, fire from the walls. We'll be like Native Americans and fight them where we find them and things like that. I absolutely love it. Now, from hearing what Joel said, obviously someone like Rip Torn's just not going to be doing that.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's just fantastic. But Rip Torn for me is like, he carries the end half of the movie, because poor old Chad Lowe didn't really got the best of lines to work with. I'm not sure he was the best casting around for me. But then they just give Rip Torn these amazingly like action movie lines where he says, "There's no road in Massachusetts that doesn't lead to an Englishman's grave," and then they all just and I'm like, where's this come from? Like in my Battle of Lexington Concord movie, like why are we having like really actiony lines? But it kind of
You forget Rip Torn makes a gallant charge. That's when he gets killed.
He does. I know he does. Yeah, he gets taken out. Was it by? Is it a pistol?
It's a couple of redcoats fire.
A couple of redcoats shoot him.
Point blank, don't they? Yeah.
Actually, that was my favorite scene in the movie is when Rip Torn gets killed.
We'll let you talk about that, Joel.
He's so bad.
With his like America speech. Yeah. Is that in the book? Or is that just for the film? I've no idea.
I don't remember whether that scene was in the book. I think they did take some artistic license in how they, drew up, some of these scenes and wrote the scripts. But that I have to be honest with you. Now, my favorite scene. My second favorite scene is Rip Torn being killed, because then you don't have to listen to him anymore. But I think the scene that for me maybe the best in reality is when they are standing on the green and you start to hear the drums and fifes coming, like one of your people posted, and then you start to see the column come around the corner, because that's the moment. You have to imagine what Captain Parker's company was thinking as they're standing there, 80, 90 men sitting there with 750 of these soldiers marching with fifes and drums down the road and wondering what the hell is going to happen, Mm-hmm. And it had to have been one of those moments where I got to be honest, I probably would have soiled myself, because I think it's just a scary, scary moment. And I think they did a decent job of depicting that.
There's a lot of tension in that scene, and you can see, of course, I don't think the movie has 750 extras, but it uses well. And you just see all the glints of those bayonets going back towards the woodland on that road. And it is quite, I was thinking, they're mad here. Like, surely they're going to run. Because I didn't really know the story until I watched the movie. So I'm thinking, they're going to run, they're not going to stand. And then obviously they did, and they do. But I thought, exactly the same as you, I thought the tension in that scene worked very well.
Yeah. Now there was no woodland on the edge of Lexington Center.
Okay.
They had marched down the main road. Now, obviously, it's a film. They're trying to, utilize what they've got in numbers of people.
Trying to dress Quebec nicely,
Exactly, with lots of brush or leaves, because in Massachusetts on April 19th, the leaves aren't even out yet. But in the movie, the
it must have been filmed. It looked like it was filmed in the summer.
Anyway, those things aside, I think that moment still shows, how impressive it must have looked to see them marching down the road. Now, the guys that deploy on the green, the guys that actually deployed on the green were light infantry. And in the movie, you see some light infantry, you see some grenadiers, you see some battalion company guys, which is not correct. But again, you got to look past some of these things, I guess, and try and take good things out of it.
No, I think you're right. Matt, what about you for a favorite scene?
I do also really like that scene. That, as you guys mentioned, the tension is really good, and I love that shot where it must have been like a crane shot where the camera pulls back and goes up, and you get the shot from behind the line of Minutemen, and then you get the little column of British troops appearing over that little creek and around that corner of the building, and they kind of just deploy forward, and that's probably that's the money shot of the film. I think that's a good shot. That's the duelists.
I think
skills
it is
coming in there, for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of the movie is saved by good cinematography. I think having Frank Tidy really helps this movie in places.
I agree. There's a few other sequences I like. I like the retreat sequence, and I like the fact that they depicted that kind of running retreat. Obviously, it's not massively historically accurate, but it's also not terrible. It doesn't butcher the history behind it. The British were retreating, and it was a fighting withdrawal. And I like the fact that they show wounded troops being carried, and a little bit of the chaos of that. I really did appreciate that, because I think this is the only depiction of this we have, and that amazes me. I can't believe that there hasn't been another film that has tried to tell probably the beginning of America's independent history, and the only film that's really had a go at it is a Hallmark TV movie from the 80s.
Well, in a way, maybe that's a good thing, because inevitably these companies screw it up. You can do a American Civil War film or World War II from any country, and the World War II stuff, you've got the material culture, you've got a lot of the extant material to outfit people or even make good reproductions from. Again, same with the American Civil War and some of the other 19th century English battles. But the Revolution, has been so dramatized, and I don't know how to even the correct word.
Like a period piece almost, isn't it? It's like,
yeah, but they just they don't know the material culture. The people who would do the production design and stuff don't know it. But I would love to see something really well done, where they have the correct arms and they have the correct, clothing and equipment and lines, and Rip Torn wouldn't be in it, which would be fantastic. So,
I mean, I'm sure as a local boy, you would also be massively taken out of the film when they form up on the green, and it's so different from what Lexington and Concord would have looked like, because it's just 3 or 4 buildings in what I assume is a historic park in Quebec somewhere. It obviously doesn't look particularly like Lexington Green.
No, they took there's an engraving that was done a couple months after the battle by Amos Doolittle. There were 4 of them done, and the first plate 1 is of the battle in Lexington. And again, it's kind of a propaganda piece, but what he gets close, or gets right, are the structures that are there. And there was a meeting house. The church was right there on the green, which they depict. Buckman Tavern, where some of the militia had waited for the column to show up after they had seen a patrol go by earlier and Paul Revere had been out, is okay depiction of it. So there were other structures that were around the green. A couple of them survive today. So they didn't do too bad of a job, and they used the trees to cover up what they didn't have, but that's okay. I mean, there's got to be a little bit of artistic license in it, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have to remember that it isn't it's an adaptation of a historical novel. It isn't, a straight retelling of the history. They're working with pre-existing material, with pre-existing research, with a small budget. So
it's also like the movie Gettysburg. That's from The Killer Angels, which is a historical novel, also historical fiction. It's not true. So
Absolutely.
I mean, they used some historical facts, but and again, it's a similar thing without the bad beards.
Bad beards. I'm going to jump in with another one of our listeners' questions. A.D. Bond asks, were there American loyalists at the time, and what sort of things were they doing? And what happened to them after the battle?
Yeah, there were loyalists to the king. There were some who actually marched with the British column to Concord. There's one that I found, which I'm going to be publishing an article about, who was actually killed by mistake by the regulars, by the British forces on the way back.
Wow.
There were others who were helping them and guiding them towards Concord. But there were also loyalists in towns. Some of them had moved into Boston, but after April 19th and the siege of Boston begins, many of these people sneak out, get out any way they can, and they get to Boston. And after the siege is over, they end up with the ships with the British troops going to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and many of them end up living in Canada, up that way. So there were a lot of people who were loyal to the king. Again, some did not maybe not fight, but helped the British forces, but some paid the price, and then some of them left, and some of them joined loyalist units or the British Army after the battle.
Wow.
I've heard it described as a civil war as well. I think that's maybe lost a little bit. That was fascinating me this week when I was doing a little bit of research into the period. I didn't think of it as that, but then obviously when you look at it, you think, well, obviously it is, because it was a colonial thing.
Well, on April 19th, 1775, we were still all British.
Yeah.
So
There's a really good Tommy Lee Jones line in the film, which I liked, that stood out to me when I watched it the first time. It's like, we're all Englishmen.
yeah.
And some of the people he says that to look aghast. I love that scene. I think that's one of the
Clutching their
stronger
pearls.
little lines. Yeah.
But they
Clutching
wouldn't have
their
done
fountain
then
pieces.
because they knew it. They
Yeah.
were all Englishmen. Many of the Minutemen who joined, and I know this is Concord specifically, on their muster lists, it mentions that they're going to be loyal to the king, but we're not going to put up with any crap, and so they're still keeping that loyalty. However, they're trying to separate at the same time.
I'm Captain Dale Dye, and you're listening to Fighting on Film.
So I think that brings us into final thoughts. I'm not sure how everyone felt, but I felt like it was a well-meaning film that might possibly not have just had the budget, or there's something missing here. And it's a film of two halves. I found the first half quite boring, I must admit. But then once the battle started going, I thought, actually, no, this movie's got something going for it. But I think it's the power of having a BAFTA award-winning cinematographer and an Oscar-winning director. I'm not really sure if what's on screen is what's saving it. It's what's behind the camera is saving this one for me. I'm not sure what everyone else thought.
Yeah, the first half of the film, you just palpably feel how much Tommy Lee Jones doesn't want to be there. It's just everyone. His character is so acerbic. He's so dour. It's amazing. I haven't read the book. Do you recall if he's like that in the book, Joel?
Yeah, and I think that's the point that they're trying to make is here's this, religious, serious man who doesn't believe, even through the, like you said, the beginning of the movie, he's trying to tell his townsfolk, hey, what you guys are crazy. We shouldn't be doing this. Obviously, that changes very quickly on the night of April 18th. But they're trying to make all these points at the beginning of the movie before the battle actually starts. Whether it's the serious provincial church-going guy who thinks this shouldn't happen, but yet he does what he has to do, trying to train his son to be able to deal with it. Then you get into the crazy, Rip Torn provincial character, the British soldiers, the fight. I think as boring as the beginning of the movie is, I think I get what they were trying to say, what Howard Fast was trying to say, or what they did in the movie. So,
yeah, I do agree with you. The thing is, I think they try and cram so much of that into the beginning of the film that it kind of becomes a little bit laden. And I think Rob mentioned it earlier, but Chad Lowe's character, his dialogue just doesn't seem to have the weight that it needs, and also his performance is, I don't know. I said to Rob, when I was watching the film the other day, he's either a terrible actor or he's a brilliant actor playing a terrible character. But I think
there's a reason why Rob Lowe was in The West Wing and not Chad Lowe. That's all I'm going to say.
I think, as you mentioned earlier, I don't think he was the best choice to portray.
I thought it was Mark Hamill for about half an hour until I realised it wasn't. They look really similar.
The rip isn't great.
No, it wasn't. Incredibly grainy.
I like the cinematography and that shot I talked about earlier. The crane shot above the common, and I thought that was a really nice shot. I love the tension that they build. I like what they're doing in some of the scenes with Adam and Tommy Lee Jones. There is that coming of age kind of story of father and son that has its flow throughout the film, and that kind of does work a little bit, but there's something, as Rob said, that underlines the whole film that just feels just a little bit lacking, and it's sometimes a little bit difficult to put the finger on it, and it may be a script thing, I suspect. They've struggled to try and condense a whole book into 80 minutes, and that's a tricky thing to do, especially if you haven't got the budget.
I don't know about you, Matt, but I could feel when it was going to cut for a commercial. Yeah. I could feel it. I was like, oh, we're coming up now. Yeah.
Minuteman number 3 ducks behind tree. Cut to commercial.
Yeah, that's it. Rob Lowe's brother can't fathom the fact he shot someone. Cut to commercial.
I did like that he just kept saying, I want to go home. And he was repulsed by the fact that he'd been forced to kill someone. And
that's just Chad Lowe. That's not in the script.
Actually, that's one of the parts in the book that I think is done really well when you read that end section of the book, where he's just wants to go home and he
Right.
he realizes what, the day has been about. I got more out of the book than Chad Lowe. I got to tell you.
Poor old Chad Lowe this week.
He's not
Chad,
really
if you watch
selling it
this,
massively, but
no
I
offense.
did appreciate the film trying to do that, because not many films will try and convey that, that blunt emotion of just like shock that you've been in such a traumatic event. You've seen your father killed. You've seen numerous other people killed. You've killed. That's a difficult thing to convey, and obviously Chad didn't manage to convey that to the levels of where you might be, nominated for something, let's say. But
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry, it's true. But I could see where they were going with that within the dialogue and the performance. So I want to know, Joel. I mean, you've done a lot of research around this. You've spent couple of years, because I really enjoyed chatting to you and Doug about this at the symposium, or where we met a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to ask, during the whole process, what was the most surprising thing that you've come across? Because you've mentioned that you've been through documents, you've looked at existing, the fabric of buildings where you found bullet holes and all that kind of thing, and I recall from the presentation that you did, there was one chap who was shot through the hip through his powder flask, and you found the powder flask. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So that was a militiaman from Acton, Massachusetts, named James Hayward, who was he had marched from Acton early that morning. He was at the North Bridge fight, albeit in a militia company and behind everybody else, but he fought all the way along Battle Road, and they got to a place called Fisk Hill in Lexington, and he stopped purportedly to get a drink of water from the well, and there were some British soldiers who were looting the house, and one of them came out, and they both fired at each other. British soldier fell dead, and James Hayward fell mortally wounded, but he had been shot through his powder horn. And when his father came and picked up his body and brought it home, the powder horn was picked up and passed to his brother, and it then was passed down to the son, and then ended up donated to the Acton Memorial Library. So that was one of the items that we, obviously I knew about it for years as a kid, and I knew descendants of Hayward, and did a bunch of digging on research on where he was killed, as well as the ballistics of the horn. And then we actually, as a part of our study, we did a lot of live fire validation study. And one of the things we did was to shoot a couple of powder horns and see if we could replicate the damage. And we came close. Obviously, with a smoothbore musket, with a ball that has windage, it's not like trying to hit it with a bolt action scoped rifle. But we hit it, and we have we've got high speed videos of all the stuff that we replicated. But that's one of the cool things about doing all of the doing all this research, and then we went through and we did a live fire on a lot of the stuff. So we had 18th century house sections made that we shot, which I think you saw a little bit of. But actually, we didn't do we didn't do a lot of that study until right after we saw you. So we did that to try and
it must have been about
book.
3 or 4 or 5 months afterwards, because you posted some stuff on Facebook, I think it was, about it, and it looked really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We've got some of that in the book. Obviously, we can't use videos, but I use them for all my presentations. I actually have to give one in Lexington tomorrow. So it really brings out that human side, that we're talking about in the film. It's not just all about the tactics and the guns and everything else, but the human story, and objects like that really help tell the human side of things.
I think it's amazing that, for a battle that was 250 years ago, there's still tangible physical evidence of that's coming to the fore still. I think that's amazing. The kind of, especially the you mentioned that you were looking at the frame of one of the buildings along Battle Road, and I think it was that house you were talking about earlier, where there was firing from in and out, and you and Doug were able to kind of track the trajectory of some of the firing. I find that absolutely amazing that we can do that 250 years on after a battle's happened, and so much has changed.
In that house, there were bullet holes people knew that were there, but as we went through it and looked at it from all of our live fire studies and shooting. We'd be like, well, wait a minute, if a ball struck here, it had to have gone somewhere else. And then we'd find more. And so we ended up using, modern shooting incident reconstruction. We used ballistics rods and lasers and lined up all these shots so you could see where they came from, where they went through, and where they went next for the most part, which was cool. And the fact that, again, it still survives, at least that one house survived, is really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
I've been really looking forward to talking about this with you, and when I mentioned this film to you a couple of years ago, and you said you had personal links to it, you knew people that were in it, and you'd read the book, and this is often in the background when you're working, going through some of the paper archives stuff that you were talking about. I just thought you were the perfect person to bring on and chat about this, for good or bad, because it is one of the films of all time.
It really is, Matt.
And as I said in the introduction at the start of the show, it's had to be this film because I think it's Saturday is the 250th anniversary this week, if you're listening at the time of recording, and there is, I think, incredibly no other depiction of this in popular media, popular culture. So yeah, I'm really glad you could join us, Joel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
hey, no problem, anytime. Yeah, it was great fun. Always good to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. With some of these things, because again, all of them have some good, and maybe they have a lot of bad and ugly, but it's worth talking about so that people understand it when they watch the film too. Because like you said, this is about the only thing out there for this event. So it's good that people will be able to watch this and know, oh, okay, that's wrong, but I can overlook this, or I get what they were trying to do, and actually try to enjoy it, because sometimes it's hard.
We say all the time on the show that watching these films, whether they're correct or not, if they make you go away and look into the history behind the film and the events that the film's portraying, that really does help broaden understanding. And if you want to find Joel and Doug Scott's book, Bullet Strikes from the First Day of the American Revolution, definitely please go and find it. We'll leave some links of where you can find it in the show notes and the description on our website, fightingonfilm.com. You can find Joel on social media as well. And definitely go and check out this book, because it's a really fascinating approach to a battle that's really pivotal in American history. Great to have you on, Joel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be here. Thank you, guys.
And thanks very much, yeah. And we'll catch you next week for more Fighting on Film, when I think we'll be bringing you our thoughts on Dr. Strangelove, the play, Matt? Is that what we're doing?
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Mm-hmm. Or it's Warfare, because we're going to go and see that the next day. So it might be staggered, or it might just be, but you guys will find out when we know. So stay tuned, and we'll catch you next week for more Fighting on Film. Bye-bye, everybody.